Awesome. So the gut-brain connection. Today we're going to talk about what it is. How do we know that there's an issue with our gut-brain connection? And what does our gut have to do with things that happen in our brain, like brain fog, forgetfulness, anxiety, depression, and other brain-related issues? So first of all, let's go ahead and talk about brain health statistics. So all of these diseases and imbalances that we were just talking about, and that also I mentioned in the graphic that I shared with you guys to come to this class, psychiatric disorders affect 26% of the US adult population, so 70 million people. And not only adults, but also children suffer from these imbalances. So things like anxiety, depression, ADHD, autism, schizophrenia, all of these brain imbalances. Now, anxiety has become something that is very, very, very normal, to the point where even over 40 million Americans experience this. Over 20 million Americans have depression. 1 in 10 Americans takes an antidepressant. Alzheimer's is just every day, more and more people get diagnosed with Alzheimer's, with ADD, ADHD, and autism. So why is it so important to know these brain health statistics, or just to be aware of it? Because obviously this lets us see that there is a really big problem that we need to address. Now, what takes us to these kind of disorders or to imbalances? Here, as you guys can see on the screen, it's an inflamed brain. So inflammation, as we talked about in the last class, is what causes a lot of problems anywhere in the body. In reality, it always starts in some form of inflammation. And when the brain experiences inflammation, when it becomes inflamed, then we start to have all of these different diagnoses like depression, dementia, autism, ADD, Alzheimer's, brain fog, forgetfulness. So all of this is at the root of inflammation. And in the last class, we talked a bit about what causes inflammation, but the question here would be, what causes inflammation specifically in the brain? And there are a couple different things that can cause this inflammation, but by far, it definitely is leaky gut. Now, in the last class, we talked a bit about leaky gut, and maybe in the comments, you guys can let me know if you guys have heard about leaky gut, if you know what it is. If you don't, be checking out the comments to see. And yeah, this is going to be the key for us to know the connection between the gut and the brain. And I'm wondering if while I am seeing this, okay, yeah. Okay, perfect. I was able to put you guys. So Esther has heard of leaky gut. Jessica, you've heard of it. Awesome. So yeah, it is something that's becoming more and more common to hear about. But what exactly is it? So I'll do a little refresher. But leaky gut is basically a digestive condition that affects the lining of the intestines. So in the last class, we talked about how the intestines, are this tube, but just like there's this middle part of the tube where the food is going through, the tube also has a wall, and then inside the wall, it has a lining. And here in the picture, you guys can see this. So here on the inside where it says small intestines, we can see the tube part where the food is going through. And then here you guys can see these represent the lining, and this is the wall. And this is the outside to the bloodstream. So leaky gut is what happens is that the lining, so that layer between the tube part and the wall of the intestines, has become compromised. So it's not as stable as it should. It's not as close and tightly put together as it should. It starts to have these holes in it. And the problem with these holes is that it starts to leak out particles into the bloodstream. Now, it can be food particles, it can be bacteria, it can be a bunch of different things. The problem is that no matter what it is, it shouldn't be in the bloodstream. So the body automatically identifies this as a toxin, and it starts to alert. So there's a problem, and it sends cells there to figure out what's going on. It causes this activation in our immune system, and it causes inflammation. So inflammation is a good thing, like we talked about in the last class. It is a good thing because it helps us heal, it helps the body address any immediate issues. The problem is that when this lining of the gut is affected to this point where there's constantly toxins being put into the bloodstream, your body is always in this inflammatory state. So what does this have to do with our brain? Well, the thing is that the brain also starts to receive these toxins that are in the bloodstream. They also get to the brain. And what happens is that the brain also starts to experience this inflammation. And it's said that a leaky brain, which is caused by a leaky gut, and that causes inflammation. We can call it something like your brain is on fire, like it's in alert, like there's something wrong, there's something wrong, there's something off. It's in this attack state. And what's directly related to an inflammation in the brain are all these other diseases that start to come up, especially things like anxiety and depression. So there's this part of how the leaky gut is connected to the inflammation in the brain. And then there's the actual part of the gut having a close relationship with the brain as far as what's going on inside of the gut. And speaking about this takes us to our next slide. What is produced in the gut that affects the brain? So obviously, if we have a leaky gut, our actual gut, our intestines are compromised. There's issues, there's imbalances, it's just not functioning correctly. And if our gut is not functioning correctly, then there's these, 4 neurotransmitters that are actually produced in the gut. And when we think of these neurotransmitters, which a neurotransmitter is just a messenger that's sent from the brain to activate certain things in the body. So if these are produced in the gut and the gut is for some reason imbalanced and having issues, then these are not going to be produced in adequate quantities. And for example, in the case of serotonin, they found out that 90 to 95% of serotonin is produced in the gut. Now, this is something that's a neurotransmitter. It's a cell that the brain uses to activate things in the body, yet the majority of this is created in the gut. So we can already see how there can be such a big issue here if there's an imbalance in the gut with disorders and imbalances that are related to serotonin, which includes all of the brain imbalances that we've been talking about. Serotonin is something that is related to stabilizing our mood, having feelings of well-being and happiness. The hormone affects the entire body, not just our brain. It enables brain cells and other nervous system cells to communicate with each other. It helps with sleeping, eating, digestion. So as you guys can tell, this is a very, very vital neurotransmitter for us. And the vast majority of it is created in our gut. So it's really important for our gut to be in a good state in order for this neurotransmitter to be produced in a healthy way for our body to be able to use. Now, the second neurotransmitter that's produced in the gut that affects the brain is GABA. Now, GABA is another neurotransmitter that works to bring down anxiety and stress. It calms the brain. It increases our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that tells our body, we're relaxed, we're calm, we can do, things like digest and things that are not maybe first priority when we're in a stressful state or in a sympathetic state. If you guys, let me know if you guys have heard of the fight or flight response and sort of this idea of like our body being ready to be in this fight mode. You guys can write it in the comment if you've heard about this before. Yes, Felicia. Yes, for real. Yes, it is real. So this is our sympathetic system. And this is very important. We do need our body to be in this state for certain vital activities. But things like digestion, things like what's happening in the gut, like creating these neurotransmitters, they happen in the parasympathetic state. So if we're not in this parasympathetic state, we're not optimally creating these neurotransmitters, which then will help us with dealing with stress and anxiety and whatnot. The third neurotransmitter that's created in the gut in some part and that affects the brain is BDNF, and this stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And what this neurotransmitter does is exactly reduce inflammation response in the brain. So we just talked about how inflammation in the brain causes all of these diagnoses that we've heard of, like autism and Alzheimer's, depression, anxiety, dementia, all of these things. So making sure we have this neurotransmitter BDNF, it's very important because it helps to always control this inflammatory response and making sure it's balanced, that it works when it should, but that it's not working all the time to the point where the body becomes exhausted. Now, the last one is dopamine. And this is one that we hear quite often. Dopamine, 50% of dopamine is created in the gut. So why is this neurotransmitter so important? Well, it's involved in the reward sensation in our brain. So like when we do something good, the fact that our brain and our body, like our brain tells our body, yes, you feel good, we have this reward feeling. This comes from this neurotransmitter dopamine. It also is what helps us with motivation. So the desire to do things, the desire to get up in the morning, the desire to go work out or eat healthy, all of these things, motivation to do anything, it comes from this neurotransmitter dopamine. So you guys can already see the link with problems like depression, where a lot of people don't feel this motivation to live or to get up in the morning. We see an imbalance in this neurotransmitter dopamine. It's also related to memory. So then we can also realize why there's issues now with dementia and with Alzheimer's. It's also related to attention, which we can understand now, ADD and ADHD. And it's even a part of regulating our body movements. So all of these four neurotransmitters, these messengers that the brain uses to activate things in our body, they're all created in our gut. And serotonin, the majority is created in the gut. So as you guys can see, in order to achieve this balance, for our brain to be healthy, I like this little image here with the heart and the brain and these four circles, because if these four neurotransmitters are balanced and produced in a balanced way that the body can use, then our brain also achieves this balance where we feel good and we don't experience any of these previous issues that we talked about. So, that's why if you have something related to your brain, the first thing that we should look at is the gut, because it has such a huge influence on how the brain is going to be functioning. So how do we optimize this connection between the brain and the gut? Well, to do this, one of the things is that we need to talk about is the vagus nerve. So you guys can let me know if you've heard of the vagus nerve. If you know what it is, you can type that in too. I'd love to hear what you guys have heard about the vagus nerve or not heard about the vagus nerve. Definitely let me know in the comments. Okay, no, the vagus nerve. I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is. I've heard of it, but I don't understand it. No. Okay. So yes, it's another term that is starting to come up a lot more in health. But just to explain what it is, basically, it is a nerve that connects directly our brain to our gut. So this nerve, it's even though our brain and our gut work independently in the sense that like they have their own job to do, they have this nerve that connects them so that they can keep in communication.
Take sweater just in case. Don't
So why, okay, so this nerve, why is it so important? So obviously, if it's the communication pathway to our brain, from our brain to our gut, and we see how much our brain needs our gut to function because all of these neurotransmitters are being created there. If there's an issue with our vagus nerve, with this connection, then there's going to be an imbalance in each of these systems. So how do we make sure that our vagus nerve is functioning optimally? There's a lot of basic exercises that we can do to optimize this connection and to make sure to stimulate our vagus nerve so that way it works and we can feel it working properly in this connection and this talking that it does with the brain and the gut. Now, what are a couple of these activities? I'm just going to mention a couple. There's a lot, but one of them is that's my favorite and that it's super simple and you can do anywhere is deep breathing. So deep breathing is just taking in deep breaths, holding them in for a little while, and then letting them out through your mouth. So you inhale through your nose, hold it in for a little bit, and exhale out your mouth. And if you do this for about 5 minutes, it's amazing, but you will literally feel more calm. But what's happening inside of your body is that these deep breaths are stimulating this vagus nerve. So it's telling the body, we're in a calm state, we don't need to fight, there's no fight or flight right now. We can do things like digest, we can do things like communicate with the rest of the body and optimize everything, all these metabolic processes that are going on, like creating these neurotransmitters. And the body can function well in this calm state. So it's been found in science, this blew my mind through research, that doing deep breathing for 5 minutes straight actually decreases the level of stress hormone in our body. So if you guys have heard of cortisol, it's a hormone that we need to live. But when it's constantly too high, our body's constantly in this stressful state, which then causes inflammation. So just deep breathing for 5 minutes, and if you can do this 3 times throughout the day, this is great because it will remind your body it can relax and it can have this optimal communication between the gut and the brain. Another one that sounds a little bit silly, but that works really well is singing loudly. So I don't know if I'm not a great singer, but I don't know about you guys, but if I'm in a good mood, I put the music on really loud to a song that makes me happy and I sing like a crazy person, but I feel better afterwards. And the reason why you feel better, why you like to put down the windows and listen to one of your favorite songs and sing is because it's activating this vagus nerve. So it's telling your body, we're feeling good, we're calm, and again, this communication can happen in an optimal way. Also, just going for a walk out in nature can also stimulate this. Very simple things, but things that can keep our gut-brain connection optimal. Yeah, Rachel, it is. It's such a great medicine to sing. It helps with stress so much.
You just explained my craving. Oh my goodness, all these years. Now I know I got to get back to that.
Yes. There's a medical reason for you to get back to this. Yeah, singing is something that's really great and that can help, even if we're not great singers like me, can help to decrease our stress and feel better and make this connection work optimally. What else can we do to make sure that our gut-brain connection is healthy? We're going to go back to something that we talked about in the last class, avoiding leaky gut. So, we talked about the wall of our intestines, and then, when there's leaky gut, it's having these holes that let the toxins go through. What can we do to avoid this happening? Now, a lot of times we feel like worried, like, oh, is it too late to fix this? Like, is there anything I can do at this point? Yes, there's so much we can do. Even though there's no actual mechanism to heal a leaky gut, like to literally patch up our gut wall or our gut lining, we can count on the gut microbiome. So these microorganisms, bacteria, parasites, fungi that live in our gut that are good, these good ones, they actually do the work of healing the walls of our intestines. And so if these little guys are happy and thriving, then they will heal our gut lining for us. They're so resilient that even if we've been treating them bad because of different things, like as we see here in the graphic, they can still come back if we avoid these things and we add things that they like to grow properly. Felicia, I believe it can heal within a week or two. Is that correct? There's no like set time that it can heal. It might be a bit different for everybody, but it's true that you can see results really quickly in how you feel and in symptoms by implementing these couple of things that we're going to be talking about. So here we see a couple of things that contribute to leaky gut: poor diet, stress, infections, systemic inflammatory diseases, low stomach acid, toxin exposure like preservatives, pesticides, environmental toxins, things like emulsifiers, things like herbicides. For example, if you guys have heard of, there's a pesticide that they use that's very strong on especially things like wheat, called glyphosate or Roundup, and they did a test and they used this in approved levels. So like the not like an insane amount of this pesticide. They used the one that's approved by the government for healthy human use to make a test and see on people that consumed these foods where they used this glyphosate or Roundup. It decimated the microbiome, or it completely destroyed these happy bacteria that help us with our gut, for our gut lining to be happy. In 3 weeks, it had a huge effect on the microbiome. So then in this case, bad bacteria and bad fungi, they start to overgrow, and we start to see these imbalances in the brain, in the gut, and in other systems of the body. It isn't necessarily 100% digestive symptoms. We can see it as well in brain fog, forgetfulness, anxiety, things like this. So staying away from these. Also antibiotics. We shouldn't stay away from antibiotics if we need them. Obviously, they're there for a reason. And if it's indicated, like if there is a bacteria that we need to kill, then take antibiotics. The problem is that in America, they've seen that the majority of antibiotic prescriptions are completely unnecessary, like to fight a virus. So it does nothing for this. And when you take this excessively in your body, even just after one round, they've seen that just after one round of antibiotics, it increases your risks of anxiety and depression by 25%. They did a research study. This blew my mind. And so that's why it's important. If you need it, take it. And then you can always rebuild the gut back, like we're going to talk about in a little bit. But if it's not necessary, if it's for something like a virus, which antibiotics do nothing for, then being more mindful about this as well. GMOs, and then certain foods that can also cause inflammation individually to us. So what are some things we can do to make sure that these gut bacteria are happy, to avoid leaky gut, which will avoid a leaky brain, which will avoid depression and anxiety and all these other things that we don't want? Well, a couple of them are here in this graphic. So this is just like in super basic form, things that we need to do to make sure that our gut is happy, and therefore our brain, is to reduce stress, find movement and a routine of movement that works well for us, that makes us happy, that doesn't cause us more stress in our body, and that doesn't make us miserable, because in that case we will be increasing our stress, which we don't want. Also, finding what foods work best for your body. This is extremely important because everybody's body is different, and certain foods can cause inflammation in some person that are healthy or named as healthy foods that won't cause inflammation in somebody else, and vice versa. So this is something that with my clients has been a huge factor in helping them feel better, is really identifying what foods work best for them and what foods they need to stay away from. In general, eating more whole foods, especially plant-based foods. So I always tell my clients to aim for at least 70% of their plate to be plant-based foods, like not just salad, but every kind of vegetable, all different colors, all different types, a good variety. All of these are food for these for these bacteria, fungus, and all these other microorganisms. That was the word that I was looking for. That are in our microbiome that will then create these neurotransmitters and help our brain feel good. So this is also really key, and getting enough sleep. Now, sleep is something that we say, oh, it's so basic. Yeah, Oscar, Impossible Burgers does not count as a vegetable. We're talking about real veggies that haven't been processed or that are minimally processed. But yeah, sleep is so important. We know that sleep is important. We hear everybody say we have to get between 7 and 8 hours of sleep. But with my clients, it's one of the first things that I really try to focus on, because setting up a good bedtime routine, a good wind down routine, if you have trouble with falling asleep or staying asleep, finding a good routine that will set you up for good, restful sleep. This has a huge, huge, huge difference on your gut, but also on your brain. Question: how do you know if a food doesn't work well for your body? Is an elimination diet the only way? So there's two ways that you can know if a food works well for your body or not. The most accurate and like 100%, you will have a clear answer is through an elimination diet, because when you do an elimination diet with somebody who helps you along through it, helps you see what things you have to see, what kind of symptoms you have to be looking out for after you reintroduce certain foods. You have no doubt of when you see, like, you will feel your body react, and you will, if you see one of these things, or you will feel great, and then you know that you're okay. So this is the best way to do it. There are also tests that can be done that test not food allergies, but food intolerances or food sensitivities. And these tests, they're not 100% accurate, but they can be pretty accurate, and they will come up and they will let you know maybe different foods that you might be sensitive to, like maybe certain nuts or maybe certain grains. It will let you know, it will say like, maybe you're sensitive to these, and then you can do an elimination diet based off of that. But from personal experience, as well as the experience that I've had with my clients so far, doing the elimination diet is definitely the most surefire way, because you have the clear reaction from your body to tell you, yes, this is good, or no, this is not good. But very good question. Thank you for that. So this is it for today. Let me exit out of here. So just to resume again, we see the link between the gut and the brain. It's very crucial. If there's something wrong in the gut, these neurotransmitters that the brain uses to function properly are not being created. So then there's an imbalance. Also, if there's an imbalance in the gut, if there's leaky gut and toxins are coming out, this is going to cause inflammation in the brain, which will also cause these issues that we've been talking about. And so we really want to minimize that as much as possible by doing these simple steps. Sometimes this can be hard, but this is why I like to work with clients one-on-one, so that way they can achieve these 100% sure in their life in a way that's sustainable for them. And then they get to see great results that last more than just the time that we work together, but that are really lifelong habits that can stick. So that's it for today. We can stop the recording if you can, Oscar.